You know what separates the top 1% from everyone else? It's not luck, it's not IQ, and it's definitely not some magical blueprint handed to them at birth. It's psychology. Because if you pay attention, the poor chase comfort, the middle class chase stability, but the top 1% chase growth. While most people wake up hoping for an easy day, the 1% wake up asking a dangerous question. What can I do today that scares me enough to make me grow? That's why two people can read the same book, watch the same motivational video, live in the same country, and one becomes wealthy, while the other stays stuck for decades. The difference is not opportunity, it's how they interpret opportunity. Poor and middle-class minds look at a risk and think, what if it goes wrong? But the 1% look at the same risk and think, what if this is my breakthrough? Poor and middle-class minds trade time for money, but the 1% trade money for time because they know money returns, time never does. And here's the wild part. You can adopt the psychology of the top 1%. Long before you ever make your first million, the habits you're about to learn in this video aren't secrets. They're just ignored by 99% of people. If you understand them and apply them, your entire financial future can change faster than you think. Let's begin. This is Zero to Founder, where ordinary thinking ends and elite mindsets begin. Most people spend their entire lives believing success begins with money. But the truth is, money is a result, not a starting point. The real beginning, the root, is psychology. A way of thinking that 99% of people never question, never change, and never escape. And this is the first difference between the top 1% and everyone else. They don't live life on autopilot. They don't just fall into habits. They build habits, intentionally, painfully, and consciously, because they know every habit is a vote for who they become. While the poor are trained to survive, and the middle class is trained to stay comfortable, the 1% train their minds to expand. And that starts with something simple, but brutally difficult: taking responsibility. Most people wake up blaming something. Blaming their boss, their family, the economy, the government, their past, their upbringing, their environment. The 1% wake up owning everything. Their wins, their losses, their choices, their mindset, their future. They know one thing the rest don't. If you don't take responsibility, someone else always ends up in control of your life. This is why the 1% think differently about problems. To the poor and middle class, a problem is a wall. Something that stops them. Something that ruins their day. Something that makes them say, I guess success isn't for people like me. But the 1%, they see problems as instructions. A problem is a message, a map, a direction telling them where their next level hides. If something is difficult, they run at it. If something is confusing, they study it. If something seems impossible, they try anyway, because impossibility is usually just a lack of exposure. The people who grow up surrounded by fear stay afraid. The ones surrounded by limitations become limited. But the 1%, they intentionally place themselves in environments that stretch them. They know environment shapes mindset far more than motivation ever will. This is why the 1% don't waste time debating whether success is possible. They ask a better question. What skills do I need to make it possible? Most people don't fail because they're incapable. They fail because they never allow themselves to become capable. Instead of learning a skill, they complain. Instead of trying again, they quit. Instead of starting small, they wait for perfect conditions. Instead of building confidence, they wait to feel ready. The 1% move first, feel ready later. And that's psychological habit number 1. Action before emotion. Successful people don't take action because they're motivated. They take action until motivation appears. And while the poor wait for the right time, the 1% create the right time by doing the uncomfortable thing now. But here's the deeper truth. The 1% don't fear discomfort. They fear staying the same. Poor and middle-class minds avoid discomfort like it's pain. The 1% pursue discomfort like it's growth. Because it is. Every time they push their limits, the limits move. Every time they confront fear, fear weakens. Every time they make a bold decision, opportunities expand. And opportunities always go to the people who move first. This is why the 1% value speed. Not rushing, but decisiveness. Because they know hesitation kills more dreams than failure ever will. Poor and middle-class people hesitate because they want guarantees. The 1% understand guarantees don't exist, only chances, and they take them. But this next habit, this is where the psychology truly changes. The 1% think long-term, even when they're broken, even when they're stressed, even when nothing in their life is working yet. The poor think in days, the middle class think in months, the 1% think in decades. While most people ask, how can I make money fast? The 1% ask, how can I make money forever? And this long-term thinking changes everything. It changes how they handle their energy, their relationships, their time, their career, their learning, their investments, their focus. Because when you think long-term, every decision becomes strategic. You stop chasing validation. You stop caring about what people think. You stop wasting time proving yourself. And you start making moves that pay off years from now. The poor and middle class need excitement now. The 1% prefer rewards later, because they understand delayed gratification is the difference between a life you react to and a life you design. This alone separates the average from the extraordinary. Successful people don't take action because they're motivated. They take action until motivation appears. And while the poor wait for the right time, the 1% create the right time by doing the uncomfortable thing now. But here's the deeper truth. The 1% don't fear discomfort. They fear staying the same. Poor and middle-class minds avoid discomfort like it's pain. The 1% pursue discomfort like it's growth. Because it is. Every time they push their limits, the limits move. Every time they confront fear, fear weakens. Every time they make a bold decision, opportunities expand. And opportunities always go to the people who move first. This is why the 1% value speed. Not rushing, but decisiveness. Because they know hesitation kills more dreams than failure ever will. Poor and middle-class people hesitate because they want guarantees. The 1% understand guarantees don't exist, only chances, and they take them. But this next habit, this is where the psychology truly changes. The 1% think long-term, even when they're broken, even when they're stressed, even when nothing in their life is working yet. The poor think in days, the middle class think in months, the 1% think in decades. While most people ask, how can I make money fast? The 1% ask, how can I make money forever? And this long-term thinking changes everything. It changes how they handle their energy, their relationships, their time, their career, their learning, their investments, their focus. Because when you think long-term, every decision becomes strategic. You stop chasing validation. You stop caring about what people think. You stop wasting time proving yourself. And you start making moves that pay off years from now. The poor and middle class need excitement now. The 1% prefer rewards later, because they understand delayed gratification is the difference between a life you react to and a life you design. This alone separates the average from the extraordinary. But there's one more deep psychological shift the 1% master early. They stop asking, what do I get? And start asking, who do I become? Because who you are determines what you attract. The habits that poor and middle-class minds never adopt. But the 1% live by, without even thinking. Identity is the hidden engine behind every action you take and every action you avoid. And this is the second major difference between the 1% and everyone else. The poor and middle class use habits to survive. The 1% use habits to become. Most people think habits are tasks. Wake up early, read, work harder, exercise, learn skills, save money. But the 1% understands something deeper. Every habit is a silent statement about who you believe you are. If you believe you're unlucky, you behave like someone unlucky. If you believe you're behind, You behave like someone who will always be behind. If you believe success is not for someone like you, you build a life that proves that belief true. But the 1% shape identity by choosing habits that force a new version of themselves to appear. They don't wait to feel like a disciplined person. They build discipline through small, repeated acts of self-respect. They don't wait to feel confident. They act confidently long before they feel ready. Confidence is not a feeling. It is evidence collected from your own actions. The 1% are masters at building this evidence. This is why they care so much about the first decision of the day, not the biggest decision, the first decision. Because the first decision is identity setting. If they start strong, they continue strong. If they start weak, they lose the momentum that separates winners from everyone else. And this brings us to the next psychological divider. The poor and middle class rely on motivation. The 1% rely on systems. Motivation feels good. Systems get results. Motivation gives you a spark. Systems build the fire. Most people chase inspiration endlessly. New videos, new books, new quotes, new mentors. But they never create a consistent daily system for action. The 1% wake up with clarity. They know exactly what their day means. Exactly what matters. Exactly what moves their life forward. Because they designed a system that makes progress non-negotiable. And here's why systems work. Your environment shapes 80% of your behavior. And most people set up environments that sabotage them. A poor or middle-class environment is full of noise. Too many distractions, too many opinions, too much entertainment, too much scrolling, too many low-value conversations. The 1% engineer environments that reduce friction and increase focus. They remove chaos. They remove noise. They remove the people who drain energy. They remove the habits that pull them backward. And when you remove what weakens you, strength becomes natural. But here's the part most people never realize. The 1% do not depend on willpower. They depend on environment structure. If your environment requires you to be strong all day, you will lose. If your environment supports your strength automatically, you will win without burning out. This is why the 1% pay so much attention to what they consume. Not just food, but information, conversations, advice, and people. They know the brain is constantly being programmed. You're being programmed by your friends, your social media, your habits, your routines, your beliefs, your news sources, your surroundings. Poor and middle-class minds consume impulsively. The 1% consume intentionally because they understand whatever enters the mind eventually becomes behavior. This is why they choose mentors over critics, education over entertainment, progress over comfort, focus over distraction. And here's the next major psychological habit the 1% live by. They evaluate themselves with brutal honesty. Most people lie to themselves daily. I'll start tomorrow. I don't have enough time. I'm doing my best. I don't know where to begin. I'll succeed when life gets easier. The 1% cut through these illusions. They evaluate results, not excuses. They track their weaknesses. They measure their progress. They confront their failures with clarity, not shame. Because to them, failure isn't identity, it's data. Every failure reveals the next upgrade. Every mistake shows the next correction. Every setback teaches the next strategy. Average people hide from failure. The 1% collect failure like gold, because they know it's the fastest form of learning. And now we move into the most important psychological shift of all, the one that transforms your entire relationship with success. The 1% don't attach their identity to the outcome. They attach it to the process. Poor and middle class say, I'll feel successful when I make money. I'll feel proud when I achieve this goal. I'll feel confident when I reach that milestone. But the 1% build pride from their process, not the result, because they know results take time. But identity can be forged every single day. This is the moment the transformation begins, when success stops being something you chase and starts being something you become. The final psychological difference between the poor, the middle class, and the 1% is something most people never see because it happens quietly behind the scenes in the places where no one is clapping, no one is watching, and no one is giving them credit. It's what happens in the empty room, late at night, when the world is asleep and only their ambition is awake. Because at some point, success is no longer about skills or strategies or even goals. It becomes about how a person behaves when nobody is there to judge them, motivate them, or validate them. The 1% live by a standard the world never asked them to meet. They demand more from themselves than any teacher, boss, or mentor ever demanded. They hold themselves accountable even when their life would not fall apart if they slacked. They operate with a kind of internal pressure that most people never develop, a pressure that doesn't crush them, but sharpens them. Poor and middle-class mindsets often revolve around external expectations. They work hard when a deadline is close. They improve when someone criticizes them. They grind when pressure shows up from outside. Their performance rises only when circumstances force them to rise. But the 1% don't wait for pressure. They create it. They build an internal voice that says, "You're capable of more. Show me." And that voice stays with them every single day. This is why their execution is on another level. They don't rely on motivation because they know motivation is a liar. It shows up when life feels easy and disappears as soon as discomfort arrives. They rely on discipline, and discipline is a far more loyal friend. Discipline shows up when you're tired. It shows up when you fail. It shows up when you're doubting yourself. Discipline builds muscle memory, and that muscle memory creates results long after motivation has died. Another psychological factor that separates the 1% is their relationship with discomfort. Most people look for the path of least resistance, the easiest way, the safest option, the familiar routine. The 1% do the opposite. They turn toward discomfort because they know discomfort is the birthplace of transformation. They understand that if something feels difficult, it's probably building a new version of them. They chase that feeling. They embrace it. They learn to operate inside it until discomfort becomes their natural environment. And while the average person is trying to escape hard work, the 1% use hard work to escape mediocrity. They don't fear challenges. They fear stagnation. They don't fear failure. They fear staying the same person for too many years. They don't fear losing. They fear never growing. But here's something more subtle, something even more powerful. The 1% manage their emotional energy like a business asset. Poor and middle-class mindsets burn emotional energy on everything: arguments, gossip, jealousy, insecurity, comparison, fear of judgment. They exhaust themselves fighting battles that bring them no reward. They let emotions control their decisions, their schedule, their confidence, their future. But the 1% protect their emotional energy. They don't argue with people who don't matter. They don't chase validation. They don't waste time trying to prove themselves. They don't allow other people's opinions to direct their destiny. They operate from a position of internal strength, not external approval, because they know this truth. You cannot build a powerful life with a fragile mind. And while everyone else is scrolling, complaining, comparing, and reacting, the 1% are creating, building, improving, and executing. They don't get distracted by noise because they know noise steals dreams. They don't let social media dictate their mood because they know emotions shape performance. They don't attach their self-worth to likes or praise because they know real respect comes from what you build, not what others think. Another psychological difference is how the 1% see time. Poor and middle-class mindsets see time as something they're trying to fill. The 1% see time as something they're trying to maximize. They understand that every hour either invests in your future or takes away from it. They understand that your life is nothing but the compound interest of the choices you repeat. So while average mindsets spend their evenings killing time, the 1% spend theirs planting seeds. Reading, building, planning, creating, learning, strategizing. And while everyone else is asking, what's the fastest way? The 1% ask, what's the most meaningful way? Because they know meaningful effort produces long-term wealth. But the deepest psychological shift of all, the one that truly sets the 1% apart, is this: they do not identify with their current life. They identify with the future self they are becoming. Poor and middle-class mindsets say, "This is who I am." The 1% say, "This is who I'm becoming." And that one sentence changes everything. Because once you start thinking like the person you want to be, you stop behaving like the person you used to be. You make different decisions. You set different boundaries. You hold different expectations. You say no to things that waste your potential. You say yes to things that scare you into growth. The 1% are not born different. They become different. One decision at a time. One habit at a time. One shift in identity at a time. And eventually, their life transforms so completely that people call them lucky. Without realizing it was psychology, not luck, that made them powerful. You've just heard the psychology of the 1%, but the truth is, none of it matters if you close this video and go back to being the person you were yesterday. The gap between you and the life you want isn't talent, isn't luck, isn't intelligence. It's the moment you decide that your old habits no longer match your new ambitions. Because right now, you're standing at a crossroads. One road leads back to the same routines, the same comfort, the same excuses, and the same results. The other road leads to growth, discomfort, discipline, and a version of you that you haven't even met yet, but that version is waiting. And it's stronger, bigger, wealthier, wiser, and more capable than you imagine. So ask yourself, which identity are you feeding after this video ends? The one that settles, or the one that rises? Because nothing changes until you change. And the day you stop negotiating with your dreams is the day life stops negotiating with your limitations. You already know what separates the 1% from the rest. Now it's your turn. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Right now. If you're ready to think bigger, build stronger, and live smarter, this channel is your new home. Hit subscribe, watch the next video, and step into the mindset that creates wealth. Not someday, but starting today. Your future self is waiting. Go meet them. You're not just watching Zero to Founder. You're becoming the person who proves the journey is real.